Hi there, friends, and welcome to the Ohio and Pennsylvania YouTube channel. My name is Trev, and I am the creator of the Ohio and Pennsylvania. So I want to welcome you all to this first video of the Ohio and Pennsylvania, or the OMP as I will call it from here on out. So this is my model railroad freelanced concept, but it's more of a proto-freelanced, which tends to have two terms I've noticed within the model railroad community. It either means you model a prototype railroad, but you make your own route with it, or you model a freelanced railroad that takes from prototype practices and or models prototype lines. And mine is the latter case there. So, a little bit of history on the Ohio and Pennsylvania. We're going to have to go back to the 1960s. So the 1960s were a pretty rough time in American freight railroading, and passenger railroading as well, with the decline of passenger rail, and you have a lot of struggle within the industry to keep the freight companies afloat under the pressure of rates from the ICC at the time. And in the midst of this chaos of Penn Central and a lot of other Alco closing, other major events happening in this time frame, we have a small little short line in Northeast Ohio named the Fairport, Painesville, and Eastern. This short line been operational since the early 1900s, serving the Fairport Harbor area near Painesville. So serving mainly Diamond Alkali was their biggest company, but they also have several other industries that they served there. In real life, this railroad was taken over by the Penn Central and Norfolk and Western, each with a 50% split, eventually going 100% to Norfolk Southern in 1982. But that was by an ICC decision. However, in my alternate history, the ICC makes a very surprising decision to many analysts, in that it declares that the the Fairport FP&E will remain an independent railroad. And so the FP&E then starts scrambling to figure out a plan for its future, having been expected to be sold off to the two bigger railroads. And I can see a little bit of the writing on the wall that its traffic base is not going to last forever. With the decline of Ohio, we see that in 1969 with Chicago Fire, and you see a lot of people starting to leave the Cleveland area. And so they decide to start branching out from there, starting with just one line purchase, that being a rail line from Jamestown through Chardon to Hudson in Ohio. So Jamestown, Pennsylvania to Hudson, Ohio. And this rail line didn't actually exist in reality, but it is based off of rail plans that were made in the 1850s during a lot of the railroad building boom during that time. So one part, the part from Hudson to Chardon, is based on the Painesville, Hudson, and Eastern, as well as Electric Streetcar Company, that actually took part of that right of way and used it, but they got to the grading right of way portion, but they didn't get any further than that in the 1850s before it went all bankrupt. But in my timeline, it ended up finished. And then from there, there's also the line from Chardon to Jamestown. That one's mostly fictional, but it is based on the Clinton Airline, which was intended to be a straight line railroad all the way from Chicago to New York, crossing Northeast Ohio along its way. And so that got partially built in this reality further north than what it was originally anticipated to be, but they only got into Pennsylvania before declaring bankruptcy. Eventually that was bought out by one of the bigger class 1s, as well as the Painesville and Hudson, while the Painesville and Youngstown competed with the Painesville and Hudson. but didn't end up taking its current life course. And that still went to the B&O in this case. So that's its first acquisition, but after that, the FP&E grows rapidly, starting in the mid-1970s. So with that, you have the breakup of Conrail and 1980 of Staggers Act, both of which start to motivate the young shortline industry to rapidly grow. And with that, the FP&E ends up being very well poised to take advantage of this situation. So you see rapid expansion of the route network in the 1970s and 80s, picking up such lines as Elyria to Toledo, pick up the Lake Branch from Paynesville to Warren, Ohio, pick up the Erie and Pittsburgh branch, a Penn Central from Erie to Newcastle, as well as some other lines. I'll show you the map here in a second. But yeah, those lines then strengthen the FP&E, but also call for a new name. And so in the mid-80s, early 80s, the FP&E reorganizes as the Ohio and Pennsylvania to better represent its much growing regional role. And so that's where the Ohio and Pennsylvania comes from. And then it grows again in the 1990s into the early 2000s and up till today. So at the present day, this is the route network. For the former FP&E, now Ohio and Pennsylvania. I will put this in the description of the video, so you can see the full version of it. It's not exactly done yet. It's pretty much close to done, though. So you can see it stretches all the way from Pittsburgh over here on the east, all the way to Fort Wayne on the west, from Toledo, Cleveland, then Akron down to Columbus, and then down to Xenia down here near Dayton, potentially all the way down to Cincinnati, and many lines in between, all the way up to Erie as well. So that's the modern day Ohio and Pennsylvania network. It is a Class 2 regional based in Ohio, with about 1,000 miles of track. Its biggest competitor is the Wheeling and Lake Erie, which still exists in this timeline, but it is formed a couple years earlier as the Norfolk Southern starts to experience significant losses due to the Ohio and Pennsylvania. So then the Wheeling comes about out of that. So as for the particular line I'm modeling with the Ohio and Pennsylvania, that is the former B&O Lake Branch. So if I zoom into the map here, it's this line here from Paynesville all the way down to Warren. And this line has historically been very interesting. Used to serve as a route to the ports on Lake Erie for the Baltimore and Ohio. But that dried up by the end of the 1960s again. You're seeing a theme here. So it struggled for traffic throughout the 1970s. In real life, this led to it being abandoned in 1982, despite protests from the residents of Chardon and the many small communities in Geauga County that were left without any rail service. So instead, in my alternate timeline with the Ohio and Pennsylvania, then still the FP&E, looking for ways to expand, already having the east-west route to Chardon, when the Baltimore and Ohio started really struggling and Staggers Act was passed in 1980, the Baltimore and Ohio wanted to get rid of that line as one of its first. And so the FP&E overheard this. They got in talks with the Baltimore and Ohio and picked it off their hands in early 1981. And it's been a rough time for the Ohio and Pennsylvania with this line. It's taken them many years to actually rebuild it up to what it was before. but it was slowly helped over the years through state funding. And then Amtrak contributed some funding in the late 90s towards increasing top speeds on the route, because Amtrak wanted to extend their Pennsylvania all the way to Chicago to handle their growing mail and express business. But they also wanted to serve Youngstown. Now, in real life, this never happened because they missed a connection that they needed to be able to do this. However, in our timeline, the Ohio and Pennsylvania is persuasive to Amtrak, and Amtrak decides to invest money in their route. Because it goes straight through Youngstown down here, and then avoids congestion and stops at a rural stop, which Amtrak appreciated. It wasn't much slower than the main freight routes, and the Ohio and Pennsylvania proved a willing host, always managing to get Amtrak through on time. That went away for a couple of years after the end of Mail and Express, but the Ohio legislature managed to pass in 2009 a bill that funded the Pennsylvanian extending back to Cleveland. And though it's tried to been shot down, it still remained in service to this day. Now that's entirely fake again. That's fictional, but it could have happened. The other main traffic on the line is from CSX. CSX has trackage rights over the Lake Branch, which is kind of funny considering that they sold it way back when it was still the B&O C&O chassis system. So things come full circle, but they send a couple trains through a day on that line. So that's just a brief history and analysis of the line I'm going to be modeling. So as for myself personally, this is my first real layout I'm building. I've done some attempts at layouts before. My parents built me one back when I was a little bit younger. As a kid, when I was like 7 or 8, I got Lionel trains. But then by 2014, when the NMRA had their national convention in Cleveland, which I live in that area, if you haven't already figured it out by my interest in Ohio railroads. They were, when that came to town, I got to operate at local layouts, as well as get some advice from other people, and that changed my whole mind about O-scale Lionel trains. I soon wanted to do HO scale trains, and so over the last 10 years, I've had on and off interest with model trains. So like 2017 was a uptick, and then that went away, and then 2020 I got interested again, but then with us moving to a new place in 2021, that was not able to work out. So then now it comes to 2024. And now that I'm done with college and have my own job, I have more time and money to spend on a model railroad than I did in times past. And so the interest came back hard in January, and it stuck with me, hence why I'm here recording this video now. So my layout plan is going to be about a 12 by 11 foot space for the moment in my grandparents' basement, but potentially eventually in my own house when I get ready to move out of my parents' house in the next couple of years. But since we don't have room at my parents' house right now, it's being built at my grandparents' house because they have room. And this layout's going to be built in phases, starting with the Chardon Yard, which is south of Chardon. Again, didn't exist in real life, but given the confluence of the fictional and the real line that I have, it made sense to put a yard there. So that'll be over the next couple months. I actually just started construction just a couple days ago. But that will be the topic for the next video on the Ohio and Pennsylvania. But just to give you a little bit of an overview of where we're going with the concept. So this is the current track plan for the layout. Kind of a in the middle of the room layout type. Starting here with this phase 1. I should turn this off. So this is sharding yard here. Then we've got staging back here. That staging is actually double stacked. It's going to be a little tight clearance wise. And then it comes around into downtown Chardon. Downtown Chardon is going to be phase 2 of this layout. And then from here it'll descend downgrade along the Erie Escarpment leading towards Paynesville. And then there's eventually, if I have room and time, there's a 4th phase planned. But I don't know if I'm going to get that far before I have to move or do that. So, yeah, that's one of the goals I have in mind with this layout, is to make it modular. I'm in a very uncertain time of my life right now. I'm not sure exactly where I'm going to be at in the next couple years, whether I'm going to be staying at home for longer than I anticipate, whether I'm going to be in an apartment, condo, house, if I'm going to be married in the next couple years. There's a bunch of factors here at play, and so I'm having to take that all into consideration with this layout. So it is being built with modularity in mind from the get-go. So that if I do have to move it sooner than I anticipate, it is movable. But at the end of the day, this is my first real layout. It's going to be a learning experience. So either way, I might decide that I actually want to scrap the entire thing and start over. And that's totally fine. So that's at least where we're going with the Ohio and Pennsylvania. So over the next couple of months, we're going to start to see layout construction. I'm going to document that for you guys so you can follow along as I build my first layout. And I hope to give you guys some insight into what I learned in the process, so you guys can learn for your future layouts. I'm also going to get into the operations a little bit more. This is intended to very much be an operational layout, to have people come over and operate it. I've been very much influenced by many of these railroad types over the years, from Tony I can never pronounce his last name, Tony Coaster's books on realistic model railroad design and realistic model railroad operations, to slightly more recent, or also Al McClellan's Virginia and Ohio, to more recent influences like Tim Garland's Seaboard Central, Tyler Whitcomb's Tenino Western, Michigan Interstate, and Chinook lines. A lot of these come from home shops, the cars that have been produced in, but they've all provided me good inspirational influences to define what the Ohio and Pennsylvania is. It's been a concept that's been refined over the last 10 years, but I'm really glad to actually be getting into construction for it. So I know this video is a little rambly, but I hope you appreciate the insight into exactly what the Ohio Pennsylvania is as a concept, what the model railroad's going to look like, and all that. So if you guys have any questions, or if you have any comments on my scheme, you can feel free to put those down in the comments below. I'll try and respond to those. But otherwise, I hope you guys enjoyed this. I'm looking forward to sharing this progress with you as I continue on. But until next time, I'll see you all later. Bye, guys.